Hi, I'm Vicky Hicks, a senior manager at BT and a mother to two young children, Savannah who's 5 and Jasmine who's 2. I am here today to talk about the realities of juggling children with a career in 2020 and how to deal with what I refer to as the double guilt cycle. Pre-children, I worked long hours, was very career driven and really had no one else to worry about but myself. Like most parents, life pre-children was spontaneous and easy. I always wanted children, so once I got married, it just seemed like the next logical step. So 5 years ago, I had my eldest daughter. I was on maternity leave, enjoying cake and coffee around various other new mums' houses, talking about our babies, comparing notes, and had naively never really given the realities of life after maternity leave much thought. The concept of a stay-at-home mum is something used less and less today. My mother and grandmother both gave up work to have children, and that was the norm for both of them. None of their friends continued working after children either. I remember my mum always being home, taking us to local playgroups, for play dates with friends, to see grandparents. Most modern families, though, can't afford for both parents not to be earning a living. And I think as women strive for equality, more and more of us want to go to work and contribute financially to the running of the home. According to the Office of National Statistics, the number of women who have dependent children and go out to work have gone up by 1 million in just 2 decades in England alone. Almost 3/4 of mothers with dependent children are now in full or part-time work. It also costs approximately £250,000 to raise a child through to the age of 17 now. The majority of women no longer have a choice as to whether they work or stay at home. I don't mind saying that I love work, and I always knew I would want to go back. I missed conversation that wasn't about my children. I missed really challenging myself in the workplace, and I missed going to the toilet on my own without a child clung to my leg asking if they could help. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing like the feeling of a baby being completely dependent on you to survive, to help you to see how important you are. But I have always felt a need to feel important in other ways too. To feel I was learning, that my brain was being exercised, and that I was needed and successful at something other than keeping my children happy. So I started looking at childcare options and again, naively, had absolutely no idea how much childminders and nurseries cost. I couldn't believe that to send my child to either just 3 days a week would cost as much as the average woman in the UK earns in a month. It's easy to see how lots of women that would perhaps like to work make the decision to stay at home with the children purely because it's not financially sensible for them to return to work. I visited lots of different homes and nurseries, signed my eldest up for where I thought she'd be happiest, and after 10 wonderful months at home giving our little Savannah my undivided attention, I went back to work 4 days a week. People that know me will be unsurprised to know that I had every intention of not letting my career break impact my career in any way. I went back to work determined to pick up where I left off and get stuck in. I was definitely not prepared for those first few weeks and months back in the workplace. I was different. I mean, looking back at it now, of course I was different. I'd become a mother. My responsibilities and priorities and outlook on life had completely changed overnight. And I had significant responsibility now, far more important than that of my career. At the time though, I couldn't understand why I felt so different. I lacked confidence in my own ability. I questioned every decision I was making. I felt paranoid that everyone around me was questioning why I wasn't at home with the baby. Savannah still wasn't sleeping through the night, and after settling her at 4 AM, I was up at 6 to travel 2 hours to work. I was physically exhausted. That, coupled with the mental exhaustion of worrying how she was coping without me, was overwhelming. Would the childminder remember she likes her milk warm, or that she needs a nap in an hour? Shall I call her and just check that she's read that 2-sided A4 page of notes I'd written for her? Did I remember to put a cardigan in her bag in case she gets cold? I really hope her lunch is something she likes. She hates jam. Did I remember to put that in my notes? Will she remember who I am when I pick her up? What if she doesn't want to come home and prefers being at the childminder's house? Maybe I should have given up my career and stayed at home with her. Honestly, that irrational questioning of myself didn't stop for months. I've since been assured that that's all very normal, but at the time I felt like the only person in the world feeling that way, that had to deal with those emotions and that was spinning that many plates at once. It was in those first couple of months at work that I learned the true meaning of this thing I'd heard so much about but never understood: mum guilt. I actually found myself trapped in some sort of vicious circle of guilt though, because for me, work guilt existed too. The pressure to continue to excel professionally and not to let my team, my managers, or most importantly myself down. And there is born what I refer to as the double guilt cycle. For me, that cycle I refer to was the constant guilt that I'm a bad mother because I put my children into nursery and before or after school club and don't spend every living hour with them. Doubled with the constant guilt as an employee because I have a family that will always be my top priority. I can no longer give my career everything like I used to be able to. In those early days, even whilst at work, I couldn't concentrate on anything due to the constant worry of whether my daughter was okay. Research shows that working mothers spend 25% of their waking hours worrying about the pressure to be a good mother and a good worker. My husband's an incredible father. He's a very hands-on daddy, but even still, he never feels the sense of worry I do, and that seems to be true for many parents that I've spoken to. Men or fathers don't experience worry in the same way. I think it's a social conditioning thing rather than a genetics thing. My dad worked really hard and I only really remember seeing him at weekends. That was common for his generation and not out of the norm. Fathers went out to work to provide for the family, mothers stayed at home and ran the house. Go back a further generation and my grandmother will tell you my granddad's never even changed a nappy, and he has 2 children, 6 grandchildren and 10 great-grandchildren. It's not a surprise that even today I think society still expects the mother to do the majority at home. For the kids, organising of everybody. It's not really any wonder that we don't share some of that worry. After a few months back at work, I knew Savannah was happy. I'd adjusted to the new routine for us as a family. I was finding my confidence again at work, and I was determined to prove I could juggle my career with being the best mum that I can be. I've worked really hard and I've had quite a lot of success professionally since becoming a mum. I think that's because I found a way to try and deal with that double guilt cycle. When I'm working, I'm on it 100%. I will always have mum guilt, but I found a way to start to manage it. The childminder, nursery, school, whoever it is, know where I am and how to get hold of me if my babies need me. Unless I hear otherwise though, I've come to learn that they are having the best time with their friends, learning how to be independent women for themselves and understanding that mummy and daddy go out to work to give them the best life, and so we can afford all the things that we do together. I make the most of every minute at work because when I'm at home with the family, I need to be on top of my game there too and give my family 100%. I commit to not opening the laptop or checking work emails at the weekend so that I'm not distracted and can focus on being a good mum. I work hard enough during the week to enable that, and I think after 5 years of practice, I've finally found the right balance, though it hasn't been easy. Something that's enabled me to find that balance and be a good mum whilst having a career is the support of my husband. We really do share the responsibility of our children, and he's a wonderful father. I've had multiple people say to me in the past 5 years, "You're really lucky that your husband is so hands-on with your kids." And I usually just nod and agree because it's easier and quicker to do that than argue. But why is it in 2020 I'm still considered lucky for having a husband and co-parent that does his fair share of looking after his own children? Don't get me wrong, I'm not denying I'm not lucky to have married a wonderful man. We're both lucky to have found what we have, and I know not everyone is as fortunate. But I'm not lucky that he's such a hands-on dad. That's his given right as a father in the modern world. It's not all a mother's responsibility anymore, and sadly being told how lucky I am all the time highlights all too often how far we really still have to go on the journey for true equality. I'd like to say I don't have to deal with the double guilt cycle anymore, but that would be a lie. My children are inevitably affected by my work. When I know I've done a poor job at work, I'm irritable. When I need to meet a deadline, I'm definitely guilty of thrusting the iPad into their hands over breakfast so I can focus. My work is also inevitably affected by my children. When they're poorly, I down tools to be by their side and leave someone else to pick up the pieces. When there's a class assembly, nativity or sports day to attend, I switch off from work and be the proud mum in the front row and make sure my little girl sees my face and knows I'm there. I really don't think your career can ever be the same after children. No working mother can be as competent in her career as she was pre-children. On a practical level, we just don't have the time. You can't commit in the same way. Your priorities change whether you like it or not. That said, mothers are superhuman. We can juggle numerous priorities better than anyone. We can run on next to no sleep and still get the job done. We have less time to waste, so we become more decisive. We are emotional most of the time, so we become more compassionate. We have laboured a baby and no challenge at work will ever come close, which I think makes us really powerful leaders. For those reasons, I am a strong believer that I'm a better employee now than I was 5 or 6 years ago. The double guilt cycle will never go away. I will always have to reinvent ways to deal with that and find the right balance. I'm not an expert at this, but I've learnt a lot about how to cope as best I can with the guilt. And so if anyone listening to this would benefit from a few tips, here are 3 things I wish someone had told me. Make to-do lists your best friend. I swear by them, and I have lists for everything. I wouldn't get through a day without a list of the things that need doing that day as a minimum. Remind yourself of the bigger picture. When you feel guilty about being at work, remind yourself that you're there because it enables you to earn the money your family needs to thrive. When you feel guilty about being at work, remind yourself that the children need you far more than your employer does. No one is irreplaceable in the workplace, and sadly, the work will be there waiting for you when you return. Finally, don't be a martyr. You don't have to participate in every bake sale, you don't have to attend the PTA meetings, and you don't have to ask for more projects at work all the time. It's okay to do your job and do it brilliantly without constant need for more. And it's okay to grab Happy Meals for the kids occasionally when you're too exhausted to make dinner. There's no such thing as being a perfect mum, so stop trying to be one. To be a working mum in 2020 is hard, but it's not impossible, and it's so incredibly rewarding. Thank you for listening.